I am live. Let me double check that my audio is actually working because last time it didn't work. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Well, I'm going to assume that the audio is working for now and hope for the best. So, last week I tried to talk about how to improve your money management skills because as PT students, that is not a big thing that we do. It's something that we always worry about. And I think that the better you are able to improve it, the more you're able to pay off your loans, the way you are able to just set up yourself for a safe future, and just not be too stressed about money in the general. Because let's be honest, the financial situation for future PTs kind of doesn't look too bad. Kind of doesn't look too good, especially if you're going to go the traditional PT route. And if you're watching this stream, let me know if the audio is working well for me, so that if not, I can fix it for you guys. And so, without further ado, let's talk about this week's topic. Again, trying to redo it from last week. And today, going back to talking about getting better at money management. Because, like I said, it's a rough financial situation out there, and it's better to think about how to improve your money management so that you can actually keep the money that you earn. And because it actually makes a lot of sense while you're in school as a PT student to figure out what it is that how you are going to be able to handle it. And who am I? My name's Armando Gong. I'm a first-year DPT student. This is episode 6, take 2 of the Thriving Student PT Show. And just a little more background about who I am. I'm a first year student. I'm also a 38-year-old career changer. So I've been through kind of like paying off my student loan journey, how to make better financial money situations, because it helps me set myself up for the future so that I can actually take my choices and decide on going back to school right now, because I'm actually in a decent financial situation to do that and not too worried about it. And, what I learned about financial education, money management wasn't something that school taught me. It was something that I had to basically learn on my own through the interwebs, just making mistakes. And the whole point of me talking about this is because I know a lot of my classmates, we all worry about money. And so the more you are able to set yourself up for the future, the better you are able to handle your financial situation so that you can do what you want to do in the future. And I want to talk about this because ultimately, setting up yourself for the future with better money management skills gives you a lot more options to do what you want to do. And for me, I was able to basically quit my prior job as an engineer so that I can go back to school full time without really having to worry about the money during the process. And if I didn't have that, maybe like proper foundation where I was able to save money, then therefore I would be much more worried about making this choice, because how would I be able to pay for it? Like, is it going to be worth it, my time? Like, am I going to be struggling and surviving in school and worrying about my finances all the time? And what basically learning about money management allowed me to basically set up a foundation so that I know that even while I'm in school, I'm not too worried about having to like find ways to pay for my bills, because I already built up a good nest egg for it. And I have in place what I need to do so that I have my options. And ultimately, having financial freedom, having financial independence, and managing your money allows you to give you the freedom and options to do what you want in the future. Whether that is not taking the first job out of college because we got to pay those bills, or staying at a job that you hate because that's the only way you can make money, or feeling stuck in a rut in your situation and feeling like you are unable to change what you want to change. And so, first off, disclaimer, none of what I'm talking about is financial advice. It is just my opinion on what I felt the steps I took in order to get better at this money management game. And that way, I feel like I'm just sharing what I've done, and none of this is advice. So just take for it what you will, just education, hoping that you can do better and not make the mistakes I did. And last show 2 weeks ago, I talked about personal finance and for PT students, and that show basically talked about figuring out what your basic necessities are and why you should think about it. And I like to kind of think back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't know what that is, like at the base level of all of our existence, we need to figure out how we can live, how we can survive. Because without figuring that out, you can't really move forward and build layers upon that. And if we're always struggling, if you have so many bills to pay and you feel like you're always drowning and underwater, like how can we plan for the future? Past recent years, like how can we plan for climate change and whatnot and big environmental issues if we are struggling to pay the bills, earn enough money in our own home? Because ultimately we need to care about our own survival first before we can plan better things for the future. Because what's the future going to matter if my present time isn't doing well for myself? So last show, I talked about figuring out what exactly your basic necessities are so that how much you need to pay per month to earn per month in order to know that you have a roof over your head. You have enough money to pay for your minimum bills. You can know how much you need on a day-to-day basis, month-to-month basis. And figuring that out, I feel like gives me at least a better sense of what it is that I need in order to survive on a day-to-day basis. And it also cuts out a lot of the fluff that I think I need, like all of my wants. Like I would love to have, like, let's say a new car or a new TV. Sometimes some people think that you might need a new TV because I don't know, you can watch 4K television a lot better. I don't know. But like defining what it is our needs are versus what our wants are, I feel like gives us a good foundation to figure out what our survival is and what are extraneous things outside of that. And so that was the whole topic of last episode. And I think it's great to figure that out because once you know what it is that you need to survive, you can start planning for the future because now you're not in survival mode. You are more, you're above that line. And therefore, you can start laying in your additional needs, like, which I'll talk about. So back to my show. And now that last week I talked about the whole surviving and being able to survive. Last show I talked about surviving. Now it's, I think, time to start more talking about like creating that little buffers so that, you know, it's not just surviving anymore. You're planning for the future, like I said. And the first thing that I think you should always talk about is like having some money in the bank or high savings fund, mattress, wherever you feel like saving, so that if something were to happen, if you had an emergency, that you actually have some money put away so that you can address it. And this could mean like a car part broke down, or this could mean that you had a medical emergency. You had to go into a hospital. You had to take your dog out to the vet. Something that just randomly came up that it was unexpected. That this is a time to basically start preparing for that, like having a little emergency fund. And I talked again, like how much you would need to survive on a month-to-month basis. And, you know, we got to start somewhere, right? Like build up that emergency fund. If you don't have an emergency fund right now, think about like when that emergency hits. It's like, how are you going to pay for it? Is it running up your credit card bill? Is it borrowing from somebody? Like, how do we handle that? And I think if you don't have an emergency fund, you know, start building one up. Like a good rule of thumb is like 1 month or 1 month of living expenses or $1,000, whatever makes you comfortable, honestly. But like the bare minimum that if something were to happen, that you build up an emergency fund in case something does happen. Because ultimately, if you instead pay that from like a high interest credit card, if you have access to that, that's like 20%, 30% that you're paying additional on top of that emergency. And that builds up quickly over time, especially if you're just making minimum payments. So ultimately, I think for me, like creating an emergency fund helped me set up so that, like, you know, some things happen and I'm able to pay it off and I am not putting myself into a poor situation down the line. And let me just double check that my audio is working because, you know, why not? And if you're watching, if you can't hear me right now, you know, leave a comment below because, you know, I really would appreciate it. And let me just double check. And let's see. Can I hear myself? You know, why not? Yep. And if you're definitely can't hear myself. So, all right, moving on. So, like, first step after, you know, being able to survive and build up an emergency fund, 1 month or $1,000. Next up after that, like I feel like it's always good to talk about like what is it that we've already identified as being essential, right? Last time. Now let's talk about what it is that are non-essentials and trying to just reduce the amount that we are spending on those non-essentials, whether that's a cup of coffee at Starbucks, whether that's going out for grocery, like spending much more money on grocery shopping, or even for me, the biggest thing was always like takeout meals. Like I really loved going out to restaurants and like taking home food because I didn't want to cook. But you do you. We all have different priorities. We all have different things that we like to splurge on. So like, but ultimately, if we're trying to build our options out for the future, by saving now, we can invest that money down the line or put it into things that will help us make money. That's ultimately the game here, right? Like we're using our money to make money and not just using our money and spending it on things that make us feel good in the short term, but doesn't help us down the line in the long run. So like for me, it was like grocery shopping or eating out, like spending a lot more money on groceries than I should because I don't know what to do with it. Or, expensive vacations. Like that was my deal. Like, and then what in turn I did instead, like probably ate oatmeal and a pack of sugar on top of that for like a good couple of years for breakfast every single day. Something that was cheap, something that was filling, and finding out what exactly I could do and pair out from my non-essential spending so that I can actually put that money towards whatever I was trying to build towards. Like maybe I think that was like paying off student loans. I was trying to really focus on paying off my student loans for a good couple of years or anything that came up. But like ultimately, it's like by reducing the non-essential expenses, you're able to put that towards building your wealth so that you can set up yourself to have options. And I've heard this quote a bunch of different times where it's not about the amount of money, it's not about the amount of money that you earn, but it's about the amount of money that you can save that really defines what your wealth is. And so if we're always just earning a lot of money, but also spending a lot of money, like that money doesn't go anywhere for us. But save up the things that are non-essential, not survival, invest that in something. And down the line, it's going to help you make money so that you can have the options to do what you want. And that's basically talking about that here. They just reduce the non-essentials and stay by that, which I know is a whole different topic. And if you've been following all along at this point, it's like you should probably be tracking your expenses. I don't know any simple other way to talk about it, but like if you don't know where your money is going up until this point, like start doing that. And I think you find it very interesting and fascinating because if you don't track what it is that you are trying to manage, improve, monitor, like how do you know if you're making any progress? Like how do you know if you are saving money? How do you know if you're not actually spending less? Like for me, that was a big deal in terms of how I was able to slowly manage my money in terms of my income, both in terms of incoming and outgoing. And I had two different ways I did this throughout the years. Like, so I'm just going to share what it is because if you don't have an idea of what it is that you're spending on, like you can't improve on it. And earlier in my younger years, like I used Mint a lot. Like it was an easy aggregator for all of my credit cards or bank accounts and whatever was coming in, whatever was going out. Simple is easiest. And whatever makes it simple for you to track what it is that you are trying to do, you're going to keep on doing that more and more and more often. But so Mint was a big option for me. Did it everything for me. And it's up to you. There's no sponsorship or anything like that. I just like using the service. But another thing would be to use like Google Sheets, Google Form. Like for a good phase of my time, like every time I spent money, I basically filled out a Google form on my phone. And then I basically sent it to my cloud and then I tabulated the results and then figured out what my expenses are on a day-to-day basis. And there are so many different options nowadays to basically figure out your budget, figure out your expenses. But I think it's important to do because part of having good money management skills is knowing what you earn and what you spend. And the more you're able to know this like intuitively, the more you're able to put into place like systems that do it for you automatically. And once you do that, it takes a lot less brain power to like actually figure it out per month what it is that you can or cannot spend, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here. But next, I've talked about creating a buffer. I've talked about managing your expenses and reducing it whenever you can. And I feel like these are all good options to basically build into place when like you're barely surviving, right? Now you are slightly above that when you start having that little buffer that you can start playing around with. And now I feel like at this point, like if you're at this stage of your life where like you have your survival needs met, you have a buffer in case something were to happen, you actually can start planning more and more for the future. And one of the easiest ways and best things to do if your company offers it is a 401k match. I'm not sure if people know what a 401k match is, so I'll break it down in like simple terms where, well, most people know what 401k is, but it's basically a retirement account that you put money into. Depending on your employer, some employers will match what you contribute to your account. So let's say, for example, one of my old companies, they did a quarter percent, or they contributed 25% of what I contributed up to a certain amount. So let's say, for example, I put in $100 into my retirement account. The company, would put in $25 to match that up to a certain amount. But ultimately, they gave me $25 when I didn't have it before. So if I put in 100, they put in 25. So then ultimately, I get $125 for my $100 contribution. And to me, that's like free money. Like if your company actually offers that option for you, you should definitely be taking it. And that's like if you put $25 over my $100 initial cost for my retirement, that's a 25% return. That is pretty good. Okay, I don't think you're going to find any good investments that are consistently doing that, especially on a company match. And so think about it that way. Like if your company offers you a company match for your 401k and you are not taking advantage of it, you're literally keeping free money on the table. Like for comparison's sakes, like the S&P 500, the typical index that a lot of people talk about, they return about 6 to 7% on an annual basis. So if you get 25%, that's like 3-4 times the amount. But you're basically getting free money. So take advantage of that, get that free money, and take it to the bank. And let's go to about the next topic I got. Oops. That I feel like it's good enough to talk about. Like I haven't really been talking about credit card debt or anything along those lines. When I talked about the basic necessities in the last show, talked about just paying the basic minimum because you need to know what it is those minimum are so that you are still surviving. Now it's more talking about like let's start building for success down the line, build up that wealth, and that's tackling your high interest debt that's like greater than 6 or 7%. Can you have higher? You can probably have higher interest debt, but ultimately it's like figuring out your highest levels of debt and slowly working on reducing that because ultimately it's like I think people talk about how like compounding really works in your favor if you put money in the bank and investments and let it compound. The same thing is true of high interest debt. It's like it takes so much to pay off if you let that interest accumulate. So tackle that now so that you're not setting yourself up for failure. Because for me, like I was taught at a young age to basically always pay off my credit cards because I don't want that interest hanging over my head because it just doesn't. I mean, I have no other ways to describe it, but being in bankruptcy, having a very poor, lots of money where you like people trying to chase after you to pay off your money, pay off their money, it's not a good feeling to have. And so let's start tackling ways so that you are actually starting to build wealth. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to tackle your high interest debt. Credit card debt is like typically 20%. I talked about how 401ks, if you get that match, is like free money. Same thing with doing this like high interest debt. The more you're able to pay that off and get rid of that balance completely, is basically free money back to yourself that you are not paying towards interest. Because interest for the credit cards don't help you out. Interest for you in like a stock market or the bank, that does help you. So let's try to get rid of like basically your high interest debt. And like if you have any questions about that, leave a comment down below talking about it. And I'll make a future video because there's lots of different ways you can tackle your high interest debt. And now I'm to the stage of talking about like we build up a little 1 month emergency fund in the bank or at home or some form of liquid account. Lots of different vehicles that you can put in, but ultimately it's about keeping that money safe and not trying to basically put it into Dogecoin or crypto, because this is your emergency fund. You are trying to keep it liquid and easy to access and keep its capital, preserve that capital, basically. You're not trying to invest that money right now. And we had 1 month before. We're talking about, building that up even more so that you have even bigger, more of a nest egg. Like, this number varies so much for different people that, like, some people like to keep 3 months in this as an emergency savings. Others like to keep 12 months. It really depends on what your needs are. But at this stage, it's like you already paid off your high interest debt. Let's start building a bigger nest egg so that you have even more options. Like, for me, I previously had an engineering career. Like, job was very stable. I wasn't going to lose my job at any point, or it was very stable for me. I could find a new job if I needed to. And I probably didn't keep that much in my emergency savings account because I would rather put that off into like actually earning money. So for me, it was like maybe 3 months, maybe 4 or 5 months of money that I just kept as an emergency on an online savings account. But everyone is very different. Like, depending on where you are, some people keep 12 months. But at this stage, it's all about, like, it's not just survival mode because you're past that stage. It's creating that additional buffer so that if you were to lose your job and you don't find it for a good, like, a month or 2 months, you can still have that money in the bank that you can still pay your expenses, whether that's rent or whether that's bills, so that you have that financial safety net. And I want to talk about this because it's like, if you don't have a financial safety net, the type of decisions that you make are much more related to survival. And therefore, when we are like really strapped and really stressed, you are not going to be making the best decisions of your life at that moment. But if you know that you can handle your expenses, if you know you are like above the water, if you know that you are not going to die tomorrow, and or you have a home because you had some money saved over, that's like a great big sense of relief. And it lets you make the right decisions for you down the line so that you can still survive. Ultimately, it's like you have a survival, you have this buffer, and this is the whole point at this point. It's like upping the amount that you have in your emergency savings to 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever makes you comfortable, honestly, so that you can weather out whatever it is that you are going for down the line. And for me, it was like 3 to 4 months. You could be whatever it is, but ultimately, it's like build up that nest egg so that if you did lose your job, you're not just stuck somewhere and not able to pay off stuff. And I like to I think if you can't tell, like, a lot of what I'm talking about is all about building up little layers and layers and layers so that you set yourself up for the future. Last show, survival. This beginning of this show, buffer, so that even if something were to happen, you can still handle it. Now it's tackling ways to basically take down what you owe so that you can start using that money and start building it up. And this is just like different layers and steps so that you can easily do some of these things along the way and check off the things that are highest priority that makes the most financial sense, but also can help you feel more comfortable that you are on the right way to right direction towards building up wealth and options for you. And talked about high interest debt. We're talking about moderate interest debt now. Like, start trying to pare that down because you got to go in terms of like what was going to cost me the most and slowly prioritize. Doesn't make sense to pay off like a 2% interest loan, but way before you pay off like a 20% interest loan. And so this is the whole point. You start off high and slowly go down the trenches. And in this case, we're talking about 3 to 6%. This could be your typical mortgage. It could be a student loan, but ultimately it's whatever you have right now that is in this range after having tackled the high interest rate. And I didn't talk about this before, but it's like you can actually call your lenders. You can actually call your bank. You can actually call people who are in charge of your loans to try and reduce their interest rate. And sometimes you drop 1%, sometimes you drop 2%. And it might not seem like a lot in the short term, but like that builds up really quickly. Like the difference between like a 3.5% mortgage and a 2% 2% mortgage over 30 years is probably a good couple tens of thousands of dollars just from that little percentage point. And so it's like it's all compounding at work. You want to be working, having the interest and percentage rate work in your favor. So if you get a chance to, call your lender, call your bank, call the people in charge of your money, so that if they're interested in lowering your interest rate, do it. It's just a question on your end to ask them, and it doesn't hurt you. It's just a little time to call them. So do that, but at the same time, start paying off like your moderate interest debt. And I just want to summarize basically what it is that I've been talking about this whole time, where it's like last time talked about essentials. This time talking about a buffer and start layering on top of that. And what does that mean? Initially, start building out a 1-month emergency fund. Then reduce your non-essential spending. And then if you have an employer 401k match, check that off to get that free money. And then work towards actually paying off your high interest debt, because that takes a huge chunk of what it is that you need to pay off. Or start practicing paying off all your balances on your credit cards, is how I used to live basically. And I still live that way. And then start layering in, building out that 1-month emergency fund to 3 months or 12 months, whatever makes you comfortable, so that you know that you have some money saved away and you're not just surviving if you do lose your job. And then get into the moderate interest debt. And I feel like this is a pretty good stage at this point where you are not just surviving, you are basically beyond that. You have a good buffer, you have a good system set up so that you're not just underwater completely. I like referring to this analogy because it's, again, whenever you feel like you're just not making it, like you make a lot of dumb decisions when you look back on them, because you just can't think properly. And that's not a fault on you. That's just human nature. It's like, I am going to make the choice that will ensure me survival in the short term and forget about my future if I can't I don't have any food, I don't have any shelter, I don't have anything that right now. Why am I going to care about tomorrow or next month if I don't have anything to feed me today? And so the whole point of these prior steps is to get you past that stage, so that you don't need to make poor decisions in that moment, but rather you have plans in place so that if things were to happen, you can address them, you have some money saved up, and you can handle all of this. And so that's basically the whole spiel about money management. It's like, are on any of these things that you've already done or are doing, or maybe you forgot to do it? Like, leave a comment below, like if some of these things are first time you've heard of it or not, or how you are approaching your money management. And next week, I'm actually going to talk about even more options to basically save money so that you can actually build wealth and invest it and earn money. And I think that's one of the greatest beauties of investment, if you can invest, is that it helps you make money without you having to work. And I think a lot of us PT students, future physical therapists, and whatnot, think that the only way we can build wealth is by us spending time in the clinic, when in reality, it's that the more you're able to find ways to generate value, the more you're able to basically make money without spending your own time on it, the more options that you're able to have, and therefore your time frees up so that you can do the things that you want to do and have those options. And that's the whole point of me sharing and trying to normalize these conversations, where maybe you had never considered that. Maybe you always thought that like life is all about staying in the PT clinic, writing lots of notes, never making, like I had chats with my cohort, like we're probably going to be making $75,000, $80,000 coming out of college or grad school. And that might be a lot. That might be. But like when we have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans to pay back, I already did a breakdown of how much financially it would cost, especially in New York City. If that's worth it for you, great. If not, let's like, how can you create more options so that you have freedom in the future to not be stuck in a clinic if you don't want to? Maybe you want to take a vacation and your boss doesn't let you. What are you going to do at that point? Are you not going to take it, or you just listen to your boss because you need that job? Ultimately, it's about creating that dependence or independence from what your employer is forcing you to do, but being able to have that choice so that I don't have to stay in the clinic if I don't want to. I can treat who I want to. I don't have to be stuck dealing with insurance all the time if I don't want to. All this is about me not doing the things I do not want to. And so having better money management, being able to know how you can manage your money, earn more money, put it where it needs to go, and go down the hierarchy of like, how can I save more money? How can I make more money? Where can I put this money towards? How can I save taxes and whatnot, and start layering and building up wealth is what I've been talking about this whole show, and talking about the next show where, like I said, talking about taking account into taxes and whatnot and additional options that you may or may not be familiar with. And so, like previously, I had a Q&A where like some people asked me some questions, and I posted this on Instagram, and here are a couple that I wanted to talk about. And someone commented like, ask me what's the bare minimum I need to save, and what's the minimum I need to do. And I think that's if you haven't figured it out, like I'm a pretty general, like every person's situation is very different from each other. Like my situation is different from one of my classmates, which is different from a PT that's out of college for the last couple of years. We all have different needs. We all have different living situations. And so what's the bare minimum I need to save? And I think it really points down to like, what's the amount of money that you have in the bank so that if something were to happen, it'll actually be able to be enough to handle what you have. Well, let me rephrase that. Like, I guess that's part of doing a live show, right? Sometimes like a lot of my thoughts are things that I haven't really fleshed out, and that's okay. But I think the bare minimum that anyone needs to save is the amount that will keep them safe for in the next couple of days, month, or 2 months, and something amount that will make them allows them to be comfortable knowing that they don't have to take an emergency isn't going to wreck them. An emergency isn't going to take away their house. An emergency isn't going to prevent them from living under a roof, because they have some money saved up so that they can still feed themselves, that they can still live. And that minimum is different for everybody. And I think the minimum that you need to do, I think it varies again, it's a very vague question, but I think it really relates to what can you do in your current moment to change your future. And I think it all starts with like finding out where you are now and versus where you want to be. And where you are now depends very lot, but like find out what your existing needs are, meet them, and slowly build on top of that. And once you figure out what your actual true survival needs are, it gives you a little more option to figure out how I can plan for the future. And I think I have one more question, and it's like, how do I manage money? And again, it's like there are lots of different resources out there. There are lots of different books. There are lots of different philosophies on managing money. But for me, I think it's really boils down to figuring out for yourself what it is that you really need to live on a survival basis. That's food. That's housing. I mean, I don't consider credit card debt like a need, but there are things that you need to do, like pay the bills, like utility bills, housing, and whatnot, that enables you to have the life that you want currently to live. And everything else outside of that, whether that's like buying gifts on Amazon, whether that is renting a movie, whether that's buying a movie, whether that is a brand new car, those are non-essential. Those are extra things that you should strive to get if that is something that you want to do, but you need to be in a good financial situation to purchase those things, rather than spending what you have now but don't build a future. At least that's my take on it. Again, it's a very vague, I think, idea, but I think it's all related to reducing what you think you need so that you can save your non-essentials down the line. And yeah, I hope that's the end of the show. I hope you got a lot out of this. Like, leave a comment below if there's something that, or lesson plan, I don't know, comment below if something you got something out of it. And you can reach me on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. And next week I will be doing another show, like I said, talking about more options for yourself to basically manage your money better so that it actually works for you. Okay, till next time, people. Peace.